I remember when I was a young boy, my dad actually was a sailor. And so he's done mainly sailing trips around the world. And when I was probably like the earliest memories of my life was maybe around 4 or 5 years old, I would go on the sailboat with my dad. And he would take me out to the sea. And I mean, imagine like you're 4 or 5 years old. This is probably the first experience, I ever had. And I remember just the exhilaration of just being out open in the waters and just seeing, the sun and the water and the just, being with my family and just the wind blowing in your face. It's just like it's exhilarating. And I remember as a kid, not knowing the world that well at 4 years old, it just seemed to me that the seeds would just go on and on and on and on. There was no end to the sea. And I think at that age, at 5 years old, I fell in love with the sea. And when I heard that I was going to Long Beach for the summer, I said, "Oh, thank God, yes." I was like, "Yes, I'm going." Just right by the water, running on the boardwalk, and it's when you take away all the condos and the stores and and everything around it that surrounds it, there's something really cool about looking at the water. I would run in one morning, and one day the water would be calm, stoic, beautiful. And then another day I'd be running on the boardwalk and it'd be cloudy, windy. The waves would be like absolutely terrifying. And you would see the sea and its power right before you. And you were just like, you're just kind of like, you're scared, but you can't look away because it's something mystical about the water, something mystical about the sea. There's a quote from a philosopher named Peter Kreeft. He's from Boston College. He kind of says something about the sea. He says, "What happens when I go to the sea is that it seems that the sea becomes God's tongue. And he assures me, though not in words, that he's still in charge, that there's beauty forever beyond the reach of man's folly and selfishness, because we can chip away all the rocks, but we can't chip away the sea. Whatever happens to humanity, to society, to history, the sea remains." And there's one experience I've kind of recall of the sea being God's tongue was actually exactly almost 10 years ago. I had graduated from high school. And of course, maybe some of you remembered, the most important, biggest thing of your senior year in high school wasn't graduation, it was the prom, right? It was absolutely the prom. That's what everyone spoke about all year round was who's going to ask who out, what kind of tux are you going to wear, what kind of what dresses were the girls going to wear, and it was just like it was like nonstop at least in my high school. Maybe your experience was different than mine, but it was just absolutely constant. And because you think about it, you spend 4 years with these people, you form friendships, and you want to celebrate those friendships. You want to celebrate your time, but I remember constantly hearing that prom would be the greatest night of my life, and that was something that a lot of people kept repeating. And I remember I kind of went out there. I actually got a white tux. Yes, I got a white tux. And I went, and I remember prom itself being actually a great time. The men dressed like kings. The women were acting like queens. The food we ate like royalty. Our prom actually took place, I don't remember the name, but we had a perfect view of the Hudson River, so it was in Manhattan. And it was just like, it was like picturesque. It was just perfect. Everything the women were beautiful, the men were handsome, and we were dancing, having a fun time, just celebrating the little time that we had together. And overall, prom was pretty great. I was having a blast. But as we all know, prom doesn't end at prom now, does it? There's always a little bit of an after party. And I remember with a few friends that I had gone with, we actually went out to Howard Beach. And, of course, I don't feel like, I think you guys are very intelligent here. You might know what happens at an after party, after prom. And, Yes, there were alcohol, there was flirting, and I remember I just kind of, celebrating this great night and going after this after prom, and I kind of began to see what was going on, kind of just begin to see what was happening, and somehow the reality of the night started to hit me really hard. And I actually left the party. Actually, I walked away. And, I sat on the bench for a few minutes, and I went by the water, right by Howard, on the shore of Howard Beach. And I just prayed. But I wasn't praying an Our Father. I wasn't praying a Hail Mary. I was yelling at God because I was angry. I saw all my friends. They were smiling, happy, running around, dancing. And I felt so unhappy at that moment. And I just looked at God. God, why can't I just go back to the party? Why can't I just go back and just lose myself in what they're doing right now? Why am I sitting here alone? And I poured my heart out to God. And all I heard was silence. Except for one thing. The waves. Wave after wave after wave. Peter Kreeft says, "The sea is never still. It pounds on the shore, restless as a young hart hunting the sea, and only the stormy heart knows what it says. I was the rock, and God was the sea. He was pounding the fortress of my heart with the waves of his mercy. I left that beach with no answers, but all my spiritual illusions began to erode. I knew that my happiness would not be based on wealth, power, pleasure, nor honor. I discovered in that night, at that very beach, my hunger for the divine. And I discovered how restless my heart was, and it was yearning something beyond what I saw before me. When I went to college, I knew when I was, this was when you begin to kind of ask the bigger questions in life. And for me, I wasn't too concerned about my career. I was more concerned about what will make me happy in this life. College for me was a quest for happiness, and I was skeptical in every direction. And it was that time at Stony Brook that I actually got more involved with the Newman Club, and I actually began to ask the tougher questions about my faith. What is the Catholic Church? What's the Eucharist? What are all these? Why do we believe the things that we believe? And I remember one time, I heard this thing called adoration, and I never knew what it was. I had no clue what it was concerning. And I remember I asked my friend, from college. I said, what's this adoration thing? What do you guys do? And he just told me, well, we come as a community. The priest brings the Eucharist. He brings it up to the altar, and we just, pray, stare at it, and there's some music and it's fraternity. And I remember I'm kind of hearing this, and I'm like, why would you just stare at it? We're supposed to eat it. Why would we just stare at, a piece of bread? If I told this to my atheist friends, they would think I was nuts. They would think we were all nuts here, coming here. And I was so skeptical. I just didn't but I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And so we went out to Huntington, the seminary at Huntington, and actually Father Brian Barr was actually the presiding priest at that time. He didn't know who I was, but that's okay. And I remember I had gone up all the way to the choir loft. If you don't know Huntington, there's an upper choir loft, and I sat at the very last pew of the entire church. And I remember what struck me first was the crowd. Seeing everyone surrounded in the church and how packed it was. I mean, I don't think there was an empty seat. And I was like, okay, all right. So, I'm not the only crazy one here. There's other people too. And adoration began. Music began to play. But that didn't matter so much. What mattered was I was so far away, as further as you got. I was all the way in the back. And yet, I felt a presence that I had ever experienced in my life. I felt a sense of peace that I was searching my whole life. At that point, I thought I had lost my mind. But really, I found the answer to my restless heart. Because the desire, the heart, was made for the infinite. And only the infinite can fill that desire. In the gospel today, of what we heard, we hear the Eucharistic discourse from John chapter 6. And we hear Jesus precisely telling them what I'm telling you today, that Jesus is truly present, body, soul, and divinity, in the Eucharist, in the sacrament. And all of them, just like I did, thought that this was a hard saying, that it was challenging. And I think one of the saddest words or lines in the gospel is when he tells this, and he says, we read in the gospel, he says, after this, many of the disciples drew back and no longer walked with him. They left him because of this teaching, abandoned him. Except for who? The 12. Why didn't they leave him? Why did they not think Jesus was crazy, as the rest did? I think because, for the most part, they were fishermen. They were mystics of the sea. They knew from their work the tumbling waves, the calm serenity of an afternoon ride on the boat. They understood their restless hearts, and that's why they didn't leave him. Why are we here tonight? I don't think it's an accident. I think all of us, most of you are residents of Long Beach. And I think there was something attractive about the sea that brought you here. Something beyond just the nice lifestyle that this place brings. There was a sense that the sea drew you in because there was something transcendent about this place that you don't find in the mainland. And I think that same attraction to the sea is the same attraction that brings us to the Eucharist. That we understand, or maybe we're trying to understand, the restlessness, the hunger we have for the divine. And I think that Peter's words rings hollow to our ears. Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Deep down we know that our careers do not have the words of eternal life. Our hobbies do not have the words of eternal life. Amazon does not have the words of eternal life. The things, our material possessions, do not have the words of eternal life. None of them are the answers to the restless heart, because we were not made for this world, but rather for the world to come. And when we discover that restless heart, we also discover that God is restless for you. That God loved the world so much that he sent his only Son for us. And that Jesus came not only to be found, but to search, to seek out the lost sheep of the world. And when did Jesus find his rest? It was on the cross, when the soldier pierced his side and blood and water flowed. It was his death, his blood, his water that created the sea of his mercy. It is precisely this sea that won his resurrection and made it our own. Let us go to the sea. Go into the depths. Seek out your restless heart, and you will surely find it in him.